Welcome back, everybody. Work on the 1113 project continues. Today I'm going to get into this fuel tower assembly. Basically, it stands upright like that, and this surface right here attaches to the intermediate cover right there. This accessory shaft goes through it, powers the fuel transfer pump, which would be right there. Of course, the linkage for the injection pump, this here, passes through this area. Diesel fuel injection pump mounts on over here, but we're going to get this thing apart and see what everything looks like inside. I'm going to also disassemble it in this catch pan, because these things a lot of times can have some pretty nasty surprises in them and can make quite a mess when you start taking things apart. Okay, first order of business, I'm going to scrape some of these old dried gaskets off of here. And I want to save as much of this one as possible. This is another gasket that's no longer available from Caterpillar, so I'm going to have to keep as much of it as I can to get a good example of what I need to replicate out of my bulk gasket material. So I'm hoping to get it off in as big of a chunk as possible. There we go. Peeling this little cork gasket off. Now there's a little square cover that goes here. This looks like it was just what we got, maybe 1/8 inch cork. It's so dry it's just going to come off in pieces. I flipped it over and we're working on the injection pump side of things now, and I'm not at all worried about saving this one because this gasket is still available for purchase from Caterpillar, and I already have a new one here, so we're just trying to peel the old stuff off. It looks like the last person that was in here applied a generous layer of number 2 Permatex or something. They really got this one glued into place. And as long as we're in the injection pump area, I want to talk about this seal retainer right here. Now there is a leather-lipped seal down in there. This is the seal that keeps the lubrication oil in the bottom of the fuel injection pump, and almost all these old cats have a bad seal right here, and it allows the oil to basically drain out of the injection pump, past that seal, and find its way into the sump of the diesel engine. You don't even know you have a leak because it's all happening internally, and hardly anybody checks the oil level in the bottom of those pumps. But if you've been observant, you will know this is broken up here, and I have the piece. It's right here. Fits right in just like it's supposed to. Now, when we took the injection pump off of 1113, this piece rattled and fell down. It had just kind of been sitting loose up in there, and I knew immediately what happened. You'll notice this little locating dowel right here. Well, this hole here is supposed to be in register with that dowel, so that the dowel ends up inside of it. Whoever was into this last time did not get this position properly, so when they slid this seal retainer in, it was likely being held away from its gasket seal back here, because that dowel was coming up against the back of that flange, and when they tightened the bolts on the injection pump, it forced this thing all the way to its seat and cracked that off, and it just kind of stayed there and rattled until I pulled that pump off, and then it finally came out. So this is usually just kind of a light slip fit. Yeah, this one's not going to give us any trouble. It's coming out already. You can see there's that seal in there. Piece of a gasket, looks like about a 1/16 of an inch thick cork. We'll just get that stuff out of there. We'll roll this up now. The next thing I want to do is remove the fuel pressure gauge. And the glass is pretty cloudy. I think I can see some liquid in there, moisture, and probably some fuel, pretty much standard. There we go, that should just lift right out. Yep. Last piece on the front is the drain for the main fuel compartment here. I usually like to loosen this plug first before I take this piece off, because they can be rather tight. And I don't expect for there to be much in the way of old fuel left in here. I pretty well drained this when I took it off of 1113, but we'll just we'll be a little bit careful here anyway. We'll get that drain housing off. Looks fairly clean in there yet. Let's take this up and see if anything comes out. Nope, I think we're pretty well dry in there. So now I can remove the fuel filter elements. There's 3 of them underneath this aluminum top cover. I see this this thumb wheel for this air bleed has gotten a little bit bent, a little bit of a wobble there, so we'll just take that right on out. That's not a big deal. I've got more. Yeah, pretty good looking bend in that thing. Must have got hit at some point in time. Get this aluminum top cover off. You usually have to watch these really close for distortion on this gasket surface, the studs and the nuts that hold them down. We'll get those corners to bend down, especially if they've ever been over tightened. Now these are the 3 retainers for the filter elements. Each one is on a square rod. I'll just pull those out, and I tell you what, these things look pretty darn clean. I've taken filter elements out of these towers before, and they've just been completely caked. These are the old original style too that look like the woven yarn ones. Well, even the bottoms of those rods look pretty good. Really liking what I'm seeing in here. I cannot believe those are that clean. Just peeling this other gasket off, and we'll see if we can take a look inside here. And I tell you what, let's see if I can give you guys a shot of this. That is one of the cleanest fuel towers I think I've ever gotten into. Usually you can expect to see at least an inch and a half settled out crud down in there. Just a little bit of sludge in the bottom. Not even a 1/4 inch of it, I don't think. That's very clean. Also, you can see down in there just off the end of my pointer finger, that little tube that stands up, there's that machine screw that holds it in. That is from this passage right here. That's where the fuel transfer pump puts fuel under pressure into this filter housing, comes up through the end of that tube and fills that whole cavity. It's forced through the filters and onto the injection pump. We're going to leave that tube in there. That does not have to come out because it is kind of a press fit in the bottom down here. And we will have no problem making sure that that tube is clean and free from obstruction, debris, what have you. So at this point, we've got all the main parts out of this casting. So what I'm going to do now, take all the studs out. I'm going to take, this is another air bleeder, I'm going to take that out, get these angle fittings out of here, all these studs off the front. That way we can check gasket surfaces, make sure everything's clean and flat and good. We'll get down to a bare casting, get it good and cleaned, and then build it back. All right, it's the next day, and the housing cleaned up pretty well. Didn't find any problems with it. Got all the surfaces clean and flat. Everything's looking good on this front side. Everything's good over here. Let's see if you can get a little bit of a shot in there, a little bit dark, but cleaned up well on the inside. And another thing I want to point out, as long as you're into this, check this bushing that's in right down in here. You see that thing? That supports the end of the fuel pump drive shaft. Let's prop this up here. Here's 11/13 fuel pump. It will mount on the base right there. And that bushing inside of there supports the end of the shaft. They don't give you any specs in the book for wear on that bushing. They just said replace if excessively worn. Measuring the inside diameter versus the OD of the pump shaft right here, I'm running like 1 to 2 thousandths maybe clearance. And that bushing's absolutely round, so that's looking good there. Shouldn't have to worry about that at all. So as long as I've got a bare housing here, no studs in the way, it's going to be a perfect time to make some of the gaskets. I know I got to do this one here. I'll have to do a few for the front, so all my gasket cutting tools are out here. Throw some material on there. I'm going to start popping these gaskets out and get those made, as long as it's convenient. So I've got quite a bit of work done off camera. Not only did I get all of the studs reinstalled into the casting, I got all the gaskets made that I need to go as far as I need to go in this video. And I know there's always people that are coming on new to the channel, and I know the question is going to come up because it does often, how I make gaskets. I've already done a video covering all that, and the link will be popping up right here. You can go check that out if you so choose. But here is the fuel tower to intermediate cover gasket right here. This is about all we had to work with before, so we got that pretty well duplicated. And then we have the gasket for the little fuel drain, this little housing here, and that popped out pretty well. Here's the old one for that. Looks like this may be a homemade gasket because it doesn't have any kind of cat lettering, cat part number on it. You can see how this one has, it's like we got a 4B7293. Cat's usually pretty good about always putting numbers on gaskets and everything. And this just has a, you can see a few old letters there. I think if somebody homemade that, they actually did a pretty good job. A couple of other minor details. That bent upper vent, I was able to find a good one that was not bent, not damaged, so we're good there. And that broken seal retainer that came out of 1113, I was able to find another one, and this one came out of my grandpa's old cat, 5J2115, and I tell you, old 2115 is coming through for us once again. Same piece, same casting number, and I got a new little 1/16 of an inch thick cork rubber gasket made for the face around that, and I've already got the new seal loaded into it. Now, some specs on that. 4B4865 was the cat number, crosses to a CR14247. Quick specs on that, if you want to look one up for yourself: 1.438 shaft, 2.250 bore diameter, CLOD is 2.254, and it's 0.313 wide. Again, probably the most often overlooked and neglected seal in any Caterpillar D2. Although it is in the fuel tower, this is the seal that holds the oil in the diesel fuel injection pump. Very, very important to get that renewed, and I've never taken a D2 apart yet that had a good one of these in it. And one last minor detail I should have mentioned when I was talking about the gaskets. This little hole right here, very important to make sure you put in the gasket. I couldn't buy this one from Cat again, so I had to make it. The reason for that hole is it corresponds with this oil drain passage right here, and you want that thing to stay open. The reason for that drain passage is it regulates the amount of oil buildup down in the bottom of this filter tower, and that's going to lubricate that fuel pump drive gear. Now, where the oil comes from to provide the lubrication is anything that gets pushed past this accessory shaft bushing from that lube circuit that's under pressure that goes through that shaft. Excess oil is going to come out the end, puddle down here. The fuel pump drive gear will pick it up. It'll lubricate the worm gear, and you want to make sure you get that hole put in that gasket so that excessive amounts of oil do not back up in this compartment in here. Make sure that passage stays open so that it can self-regulate and maintain the proper amount of oil. So with all that out of the way, some assembly can begin. I'm going to start by putting the drain on the housing, and it's supposed to cant up like that. You would think that the plug would be down, but no, you can reference it with the manual, and it is supposed to be positioned up like that. So, and when I recondition fasteners, I chase all of the threads. I run a die over the studs, I run a tap through the nuts, and it's just so much nicer just to be able to spin everything down with your fingers and then just give it that last little bit with the wrench. Just one of those little conveniences that can make life a lot easier. And at this point now, I might as well install the housing onto the engine because there's really no more point in having it sitting on the bench. Alright, the nuts are all tight, and I put some flat washers underneath these three just to get some tension on that gasket in there. These will come back off when it's time to put the injection pump on. Now I'm going to put the seal retainer in. I've got the little cork gasket that I made on there. Seal is in, got a little bit of grease on the lip. I've greased the accessory shaft and covered the sharp corners on the end with some tape just to protect the seal a little bit. So we'll just carefully guide that on. Like I said, the most often neglected or overlooked seal in any Series D2. Slide all this in. Got the dowel lined up with the hole, and when the injection pump is installed, it will apply the pressure needed to this retainer to make the gasket beneath it seal. So might as well get the tape off now. All right, now we're going to look at the filter elements. Like I said, these are the original style. They're like a very tightly woven spool of yarn, really, is about what they are, kind of a fabric. And the way these work, fuel under pressure is put to the bottom side of this plate here, and it has to be forced into the filter itself and then go up the middle of it and then exit beneath these keeper springs up here. That's how these work. Each one is mounted to a little square rod, and then this keeper holds this cross pin, and that's basically what keeps them secured to the plate. Pretty simple to remove them. Just compress the spring, pull that little cross pin out of the top, and then the little plastic keeper comes off. These are sometimes brittle and can sometimes break, so you have to handle them with care. Then the spring can come off, and just take the rod out of the filter element, and this is the piece that gets replaced right here. Okay, with everything cleaned up, we can put this back together. I want to tell you about the filter numbers real quick though. The original CAT number is a 5B770. You can still get those from CAT. I don't know what the current number is, because honestly, I always go just like with these Wix brand. It's still a good filter, and the parts store is a lot closer than the CAT dealer. It used to be a number 33164, used to be the Wix part number for that. That has since changed, and we're a 33825 now, and these only come 1-2 a package, and it's a sock type filter now. It's not the woven style like the originals. Back in the day, Napa used to sell these filters too, and they sold a 3-pack kit that had the top cover gaskets in it. I just make these anymore. Napa no longer has that kit at all, and I think CAT still has these top cover gaskets available too. I just make mine because it's just easier. But the Wix filters are a good fit. Just put it on the rod. Start it in the top plate, spring on, little plastic keeper on the top, compress the spring, pin in, and there we go. It is kind of nice to come wrapped in plastic when they're new. Just finished putting all these together. You know, I'm not going to throw these away either, because these really don't look bad yet. I think those still have some life left in them, being that it's getting a little bit harder to find these filters. Like I say, I'm not going to throw those away. Push comes to shove, I might just be running those old styles yet. But you know what they say, times they are a-changing. Get the pin in for number 3. There we are. And as you can see, I usually stock up, try and keep at least one extra set on hand. So the last thing we need to worry about is this top cover for that filter housing. These are usually always distorted. Because they're just aluminum, they'll pull down and create low spots around the 4 attachment points there. And these openings, especially at the top, like to distort and close in around the stud, because you have lock washers and everything grabbing onto them. So you usually need to make sure those holes are round all the way to the top again, and make sure we've got a good flat surface here for those gaskets to seal on, because fuel is so thin anyway, it can find its way through such small leak paths that you really got to get that really flat if it's going to seal well against the gaskets, especially considering it is under about 15 pounds of pressure under here. Now, I don't have a lapping stone, but I do have a table saw that has some machine flat top, and it's always got me close enough for what I'm trying to do. So we'll just start out on a piece of sandpaper. We'll just give it a test. See where the wetness marks are. And we got a few little low spots in there. So we'll just carefully go at it, see if we can flatten that back down again. Okay, I'm starting to like the looks of that. Checking these through holes now with this reamer. Sure enough, they have collapsed in on the top a little bit, so just get that on through there. Peel out that material that is pushed in. There we go. That opens it back up. Okay, now when we put the filters in, we make sure this round hole right here is in register with that right there. That is the pressure passage that feeds the fuel injection pump. So if you put this thing on wrong, like 180 off, it's going to block that, and nothing's going to happen. Also, we have this little round hole here. has to be in register with that one there. That is an air bleed. So we'll start by placing the gasket on there properly. Air bleed hole open, main pressure passage open. Filters go in. Next, gasket goes on, and we have to make sure that, again, that air bleed passage lines up and that our gasket does not obstruct the main pressure passage down to the pump. And then the lid can go on finally. The other upper bleed screw goes towards the front. We'll just throw the lock washers on and the nuts. The reason why we reamed all 4 of those holes is to make this so it's a nice fit on there, because when I pulled it off, it was doing a lot of binding on the threads. I could tell those holes had come in a little bit. But again, we're going to leave all this stuff just hand tight, because I like to prime this filter tower before I start cranking it. Basically take the lid off and just manually pour a bunch of diesel in, get it most of the way full, drop the filters back in, and I finally seal it up. That, makes it so you don't have to crank quite so much with the starting engine. Get the new bleed screw in the front. All right, and with that, we've got the filter housing on the engine. That's as far as I'm going here tonight. I'm not going to do the fuel pressure gauge right now. That's going to wait until I'm doing all the gauges, because that's kind of a mindset all of its own to start tinkering with those things. So we're going to leave that angle fitting out here, as well as the line that feeds the gauge. And I'm also going to leave that other angle fitting off that would be right here, because if it's installed in the tower, it gets in the way of the cylinder head when I'm trying to drop it down onto the stud. So it has to be out anyway. To explain these bleeders real quick, this one on the front is basically the lower compartment air bleed. You would open that up, spin the diesel engine over. When you get fuel coming out of here, you'd close it. That bleeds everything from the filter plate down. Once you got good fuel there, you would open up this wheel. That's the bleeder on the top. That also feeds that little bleed passage that we made sure to align the gaskets with. That's what feeds that angle fitting, and there's a tube that carries that on down so you don't run fuel all over the side of the tower. But basically this bleeds everything above the filters up in this upper compartment. So that's the explanation on those. We're probably going to get into maybe fuel transfer pump next. I haven't really decided yet. Eventually we're going to be getting the injection pump on there, but that's about as far as we go here today. We're just pecking away at it, doing what we can do. That cylinder head snafu is kind of throwing my schedule off, but anyway, lots of busy work while that thing soaks. Thanks for watching, everybody. Tune in again.